Last week was the most anticipated week of the college football season. Week 7 was circled on everyone's calendars, and there is no doubt that Week 7 lived up to the hype. What does Week 8 have in store for us? As college football the month of October, it's been absolute madness. Status quo does not exist. As Week 6 was upset avalanche, Week 7, the week of the season, living up to the hype, not disappointing us. Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 8 college football predictions. And the 7 games on the docket this week: Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, Miami and Louisville, LSU and Arkansas, Nebraska and Indiana, Michigan and Illinois, Alabama and Tennessee, and closing things out with the game of the week, a top 5 showdown, number 5 Georgia and number 1 Texas. Let's get right into the Week 8 college football predictions. Game 1 on the docket this week, number 12 Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. I have to remind myself every week that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois in Week 2. And ever since that game, Riley Leonard has played clean football, 60 for 86 for 685 passing yards, 6 touchdown passes, and no interceptions. He also has 326 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. After the A&M game in Week 1, I did say in my Week 1 takeaways that defensively, Notre Dame was going to be one of the best defenses in the country. But offensively, I was still not sold on them. And then the very next week, we know they lost to Northern Illinois as a nearly 4 touchdown favorite. But Notre Dame, they are 8th in scoring defense, only giving up 11.67 points per game. And they are 16th in rushing offense. And I do think that is going to be a key factor in this game, because Georgia Tech, they are also in the top 25 in rushing offense, 25th in rushing offense, averaging 204.5 rushing yards per game. Notre Dame averaging 216.5 rushing yards per a game. And Haynes King going into the season, I said in my Week 0 predictions, when predicting Florida State and Georgia Tech, I wanted to see Haynes King play clean football this season, as last year he threw 16 interceptions, which led the ACC, and this season he's only thrown 1 interception all year long. And Georgia Tech's offensive line has only given up 1 sack so far this season. Running back Jamal Haynes, 536 rushing yards this season, 7 rushing touchdowns, and averaging 5.5 yards a carry. And this game, I do think it does come down to who runs the football better in this game. And I do think that will be Jeremiah Love and Notre Dame. As I do think that in a very close game, the Irish, they do take the victory. I have Notre Dame winning by exactly a touchdown, and at this current moment, I believe Notre Dame is favored by 7.5 points. I do think this Georgia Tech team, they are a gritty of enough team to cover in this game and make it a close game. But I do think at the end of the day, Notre Dame, they do get the close victory. Up next, number 6 Miami and Louisville. Miami had their bye week last week, and I felt like the bye week could not have been at a better time for Miami, as their last 2 games, they narrowly escaped the upset. The defense has given up an average of 38.5 points per game in their last 2 games, and many argue that Miami has won their last 2 games controversially. And Miami is also entering the toughest part of their schedule. Louisville this week, a team for a few weeks before Louisville, they went on a 2-game losing streak, felt like could be a candidate to give Miami their first loss of the year, a potential trap game for Miami this week. And then Florida State next week in a rivalry game. Florida State, they don't have much to play for at this point in the season. So Florida State is just looking to spoil the season of anyone who crosses their path. Then Duke the week after that. Only one loss in the year for Duke so far. Georgia Tech on the road the next week, a Georgia Tech team notorious for pulling off upsets in recent years. Wake Forest, they should get past Wake Forest pretty easily. And then on the road at Syracuse. Syracuse only one loss on the year so far. Cam Ward is second in the FBS in passing yards this season with 2,219 on the season. Miami is first in scoring offense and total offense, scoring an average of 47.7 points per game and averaging 583.8 yards per game. They are fourth in time of possession. Louisville, they are 22nd total offense. So I do think Louisville, they do have the offense to compete with Miami, averaging 461.8 yards per game. Running back Isaac Brown, 263 rushing yards in the last 2 games for Louisville. And both quarterbacks, they've been throwing some interceptions as of late. Tyler Shuck, an interception in his last 3 games. Cam Ward, 4 interceptions in his last 3 games. So I do think that if Louisville's going to win this game, they have to win the turnover battle. I do think both teams, they have the potential of turning the ball over a couple of times in this game. It's going to be which offense will take advantage of them. And despite Miami's defense giving up 38.5 points per game in their last 2 games, I do think with Miami being off of the bye week, I think that will make a difference for Miami in this game. And I'm going to pick Miami to stay undefeated, but I do feel like this is a trap game for Miami. As we have seen in the past, Miami have strong starts to the season, but then they have one game where it's a complete trap game and they fall upset. But I don't think that happens this week. I do feel like Louisville in their last 3 games, they have been struggling a bit. They did lose to Notre Dame and SMU back-to-back. They narrowly defeated Virginia last week. I have Miami winning this one. Number 8, LSU and Arkansas. LSU is 31st in scoring offense, scoring an average of 34.2 points per game. They're 25th in total offense, averaging 460.3 yards per game. Quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, 1,989 passing yards on the season so far, 6th in the FBS. So far, the theme this week is potential trap games. This is the 3rd game in a row to start off the Week 8 predictions where I feel like it is a trap game. And the reason why I find this game in particular a trap game is because I am sold on Arkansas at this point in the season. I do feel like, despite not being ranked, I do feel like Arkansas is a top 25 caliber team. They're 8th in total offense, averaging 484.8 yards per game. They're 39th in scoring offense, scoring an average of 33 points per game. Arkansas had their bye week last week, but going into their bye week, they went into it with a lot of confidence as they upset Tennessee 19-14, holding Tennessee's high-octane offense to just 14 points on the night. And LSU, they're off an emotional victory over Ole Miss in overtime. Garrett Nussmeier, he did make throws when he needed to, stepping up in the fourth quarter and in overtime. The one thing that I am concerned about for Arkansas, well, there is two things now that I'm thinking of it. If Arkansas is going to pull off this upset, they have to play clean football, as turnovers is the main reason why Arkansas is not undefeated right now. In their two losses, they had 3 turnovers against Oklahoma State and against Texas A&M. In their 2 losses, 3 turnovers in each. And if they would have played clean football, no doubt that they win those games. Arkansas is 8th in third down conversion percentage. Arkansas extending drives is going to help their chances of pulling off this upset. And what is the status of Arkansas quarterback Taylon Green? As Taylon Green is a big reason why Arkansas is in the position they're in right now. Taylon Green, I think, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the entire country. They are expecting him to play, so he has had the bye week to rest up and heal. I do want to call for the upset, but I don't know exactly how healthy Taylon Green is going to be. If Taylon Green was at 100%, I would 100% be on board with picking Arkansas to pull off the upset. In fact, I had Arkansas pulling off the upset for a near moment, but I have changed my mind, and I am picking LSU to survive and advance. And I think they overcome this trap game potential, as they could be looking ahead to Texas A&M next week, as that's another road game for LSU. And the last time they went on the road to College Station, they had college football playoff aspirations and hopes, and it was ruined by a Texas A&M team that didn't have anything to play for that evening, but they spoiled LSU's season that year. I do think LSU, I think it's a survive and advance game for LSU. I think Arkansas, they keep this game close. There is a reason why the books have this game as LSU only being a 2.5-point favorite. I do think the Tigers survive and advance. Up next, we have Nebraska and the team I won my first national championship with in College Football 25, number 16 Indiana. Both teams had a bye week last week, and this is a matchup that I have been hyping up for a couple of weeks now. Indiana is currently favored by nearly a touchdown, and it is understandable why they are. Indiana, they are second scoring offense, averaging 47.5 points per game, only behind Miami. They are fourth in total offense, averaging 515.7 yards per game. However, I do think in this game, defense is where it's going to be at in this game. Nebraska is 7th in team sacks. Indiana is 10th in team sacks. Nebraska is 13th in total defense. Indiana is 6th in total defense. Nebraska is 7th in scoring defense. Indiana 11th in scoring defense. And the narrative for this game all week is going to be Nebraska head coach Matt Rhule. Many people may know this, but other people may not. Nebraska head coach Matt Rhule in his coaching career is 2-20 against top 25 teams. And I do think that Indiana being ranked, despite this history with Matt Rhule and ranked opponents, I think it actually does work in Nebraska's favor down the line. As if Indiana was unranked going into this game, I do think Nebraska would overlook them. Because Nebraska, they play Ohio State next week. And a lot of times when teams, they have a big opponent in their next game, they tend to overlook their opponent this week. But Nebraska, they're not going to do that. Nebraska is currently one win away from bowl eligibility. And last year, they had 5 wins on the year, only needing to win one of their final 4 games to become bowl eligible for the first time since 2016. And they couldn't get one more victory. But now they're in the same position as they were last year, but they have more chances to get that 6th win for bowl eligibility. And there is still a long way to go in the season for Nebraska to get to that next step and make a bowl game. When I look at Indiana's schedule, when I looked at it going into the season, I did think that 8 wins could easily be on the table for Indiana. And so far, they are undefeated at this point in the season. But when you look at Indiana's schedule and who they have won against, they haven't really won against anybody that really catches your eye. And this is going to be the toughest opponent Indiana has faced so far. The most physical team Indiana has faced so far. And even though Nebraska, they aren't up towards the top in offensive stats like Indiana is, I do think Nebraska, they do have the offense to compete with Indiana in this game. And I do think Nebraska's physicality is going to be a big factor in this game. Indiana, they haven't played a physical team like Nebraska yet this season. And for that, I'm going to call for the upset. I do think Matt Rhule is due for a top 25 victory. And I do think it happens this week. I think Nebraska goes on the road. I do think they surprise some people. As Indiana, they are favored by nearly a touchdown at this point in the week. And the spread, it could go up or down. But I'm going to pick Nebraska to pull off the upset. Number 24, Michigan, and number 22, Illinois. Michigan had a bye week last week, which I felt was much needed for the Wolverines. The week prior, a loss on the road to Washington in a national title game rematch. And they go on the road to take on Illinois. And Illinois, they narrowly escaped an upset against Purdue last week, a 50-49 win in overtime. Purdue, a team who is notorious for pulling off massive upsets, nearly got another one. But Illinois, they survived and advanced, setting up a top 25 matchup. The big question for me in this game, who is going to start at quarterback for Michigan? Is it going to be Jack Tuttle? Is it going to be Alex Orji? Or do they turn it back over to Davis Warren, which I doubt they do that, considering Davis Warren was benched already this season in favor of Alex Orji. I do think the best solution for a quarterback for Michigan the rest of the way is Jack Tuttle. But I do think Alex Orji, I think he could be utilized in short yardage situations. Running back Khalil Mullings for the Wolverines, 6.5 yards per carry. Donovan Edwards, he has had some good games so far this season, but he has been pretty disappointing for most of the year, which that is very surprising because last year, Donovan Edwards, he was being talked about as a running back who could be a starter on just about any other team in the country, as he was behind Blake Corum. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in the national title game against Washington, but not a great year for Donovan Edwards, which is very surprising. For Illinois, quarterback Luke Altmaier, 14 touchdown passes and only 1 interception so far this season. And a big difference for me in determining who's going to win this game is who is going to really exploit the opposition's weaknesses the best. For Michigan, If Illinois can contain the run, which Illinois' run defense ranks 77th in the FBS, allowing an average of 149 rushing yards a game. Michigan, not only is it quarterback plays, Michigan still needs to figure out their quarterback situation. They need to find which quarterback is going to provide a spark for them the best as the rest of the season goes along. But Michigan's 110th in pass defense, giving up an average of 259.8 yards per game. Yards passing per game. I do think in this game, if Luke Altmaier, if he does not turn the ball over, and if Illinois' run defense is able to contain the running game for Michigan, I think Illinois wins. But I do think we see Michigan return to their identity after they lost to Texas. Because after they lost to Texas, their next 3 games, 301 rushing yards against Arkansas State, 290 against USC, 155 against Minnesota. Plus, with the bye week, whoever it is that starts at quarterback, they had about a week to make adjustments if it is Jack Tuttle who starts, which I think it should be who starts. He had an extra week to learn the offense a bit more, to show improvements, and I think in a 3-point game, Michigan gets the victory. Number 7, Alabama, and number 11, Tennessee. Both teams, they narrowly escaped last week. Alabama against South Carolina, Tennessee against Florida, and one of the best rivalries in all of college football. Both teams are in the top 10 in scoring offense. Tennessee is 9th, averaging 42.2 points per game. Alabama, 41.7 points per game. Tennessee, however, they have really struggled to score points in the last 2 games. Held to just 14 points against Arkansas a couple weeks ago, and last week held to just 23 against Florida. But Florida is a team that is notorious for giving Tennessee trouble. Alabama, they are 55th in total defense, averaging 347.5 yards per game allowed, which that was a big question mark for Alabama going into the season with the first season under new head coach Kalen DeBoer from Washington last year, where Washington's defense, they were not a good defense statistically, but they did have their moments where they rose to the occasion when they needed to. And last week against South Carolina, it was a big example of that. As South Carolina, they had a chance to steal the victory from Alabama, recovering an onside kick. But Lenore Sellers throws an interception, and it seals the win for Alabama. A much needed win for Alabama after being upset by Vanderbilt the week prior. For Tennessee, they received devastating news as linebacker Keenan Peely is out for the season, Tennessee's leading tackler. Dylan Sampson for the Volunteers, 8th in the FBS in rushing yards, with 699 on the season so far, and he is leading the SEC Conference in rushing yards as well. Alabama is 54th in rushing defense. Tennessee, they are 2nd in total defense. And I do think that this game, believe it or not, is going to go back and forth. Jalen Milroe, he has struggled a little bit lately. 4 interceptions in his last 3 games. One of them was in the Georgia game, but that was just one mistake he made in what was a phenomenal performance on the night. But the last 2 games, Alabama's really been struggling. And I am going to pick Tennessee to pull the upset here. I do think it is a back and forth game like it was 2 seasons ago. But I just think Tennessee will be able to utilize the home crowd in this game, as this is Kalen DeBoer's second road game in the SEC, and it's going to be a very hostile environment in Neyland Stadium. And I think the crowd is going to be a difference maker in this game. I'm going with the Vols. Closing out the Week 8 college football predictions with the game of the week, number 5 Georgia and number 1 Texas. A top 5 matchup for the second week in a row, and it is going to be absolute cinema. For Georgia, head coach Kirby Smart caught in 4K last week, shoving Mississippi State quarterback Michael Van Buren Jr. Kirby Smart claims that he doesn't remember shoving him, but it was captured on camera, and Kirby Smart got caught in 4K. And a talking point for Georgia in the last couple of seasons is the culture at Georgia. And if Kirby Smart is losing the culture at Georgia, I do think with his actions last week, I think it's evidence that he has. And Kirby Smart is being saved by Georgia being in national championship contention every single season, because I feel like if Georgia wasn't championship contenders every single season, and if they were your typical 9-3, 8-4 team just about every single season, they would consider parting ways with Kirby Smart with the way Georgia's culture has been in the last couple of seasons. But back to the game at hand here, a top 5 matchup, Georgia going on the road to take on the top-ranked team in the country. Texas, they did start off slow in the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma last week, which I did anticipate, as it was going to be Quinn Ewers' first game action back from injury, and he had an interception early in the game, and then a bad punt for Texas. It gave Oklahoma a 3-0 lead in the first quarter, but after that, it was complete domination for Texas. They showed why they're the number 1 team in the country, outscoring Oklahoma 34-0 after that. Texas, they are first in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 6.33 points per game. They're first in total defense, only giving up an average of 229.7 yards per game. They are 7th in scoring offense, scoring an average of 43.2 points per game. While Georgia, quarterback Carson Beck, 9th in the FBS in passing yards with 1,818 on the season so far. Georgia is 28th in total offense, averaging 452 yards per game. Defensively, Georgia is struggling this season to their standards, as the last few seasons we have seen Georgia at the top of defensive statistics. But Georgia is 20th in scoring defense, giving up an average of 17.7 points per game. And they're 28th in total defense, allowing an average of 312.5 yards per game. This is going to be the toughest opponent Texas has faced off against so far this season. And with the way Texas's schedule lines up, going into the season for Texas, I felt like this game right here, if Texas got past Georgia, then I think they finished the season undefeated, at least in regular season play. But postseason play, we'll have to wait and see. But Texas, without a doubt, is the number 1 team in the country. And I think in this game they are going to prove why they are, once again, just like they did in quarters 2 through 4 last week against Oklahoma. I do think Texas does win this game. The question is, by how much? Does Georgia make this game a very close game? I feel like it's hard to pick against Texas right now, as Texas, they just look unbeatable right now. I get that it's college football and nobody is unbeatable. Everybody is beatable. But this Texas team, it's reminding me of Georgia's 2021 team, where they have the best defense in college football, where it's tough to score against Texas. I think Texas wins this game, and I do think that if they do indeed win this game, I think they finish the regular season undefeated, but postseason play we'll have to wait and see on that one. And that will do it for my Week 8 college football predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. If there was a game I did not predict this week that was not one of the 7 games I predicted this week, please leave in the comment section. I will give you a response. For those of you that tune in for my NFL predictions, the NFL predictions for Week 7 will be out tomorrow. For those of you that don't, enjoy the games this Saturday, and I hope to see you back next week. Have a good one.